What if I tell you that sometimes God has so many ways bless everyone in this life, and He also has many ways to answer your prayers? Watch carefully as this story teaches us the important lessons about how blessing can come into your family in different ways. Once upon a time, in the busy and lively streets of Imo State, there lived a man and his wife. Everyone in the neighborhood knew them simply as Papa Chibike and Mama Chibike. Together, they had one son, a bright and active 12-year-old boy named Chibike. Papa Chibike was a hard-working man. He drove, worked as a transporter, carrying goods and passengers from one town to another. He knew the roads of Imo State well, every bend, every pothole, every shortcut. He was the kind of man who woke up early, prayed before leaving the house, and never returned home without something in his hand for his family. He was not a wealthy man, but he was a responsible one. Mama Chibike was a trader who sold food items in the local market. She sold rice, tinned tomatoes, Maggi, crayfish, and various condiments that the women in the neighborhood came to buy from her regularly. She had a warm way of talking to people that made them feel comfortable. Her customers were not just customers, they were friends. She remembered their names, remembered their children's names, and always had a kind word ready. Together, Papa Chibike and Mama Chibike had built a simple but good life. They had a small but clean house with a small yard. There was food on their table, there was laughter in their home, and their son Chibike was their pride and joy. A smart boy who loved football, always came home with good reports from school, and could make his mother laugh with his funny stories about what happened in class. Life was not always easy for this family, but they carried their struggles with faith and a smile. One evening, Papa Chibike, Mama Chibike, and young Chibike were returning from a journey. They had traveled to visit a relative in a nearby town for a family occasion, a naming ceremony for a cousin's new baby. It had been a good day. There was food, music, dancing, and laughter. The family had prayed together, eaten together, and celebrated together. Now they were on their way back home to Imo. The road was long, the sky was slowly turning orange and pink as the sun began to set. A cool evening breeze was coming in through the slightly open window. Young Chibike, full of food and tired from playing with the other children at the party, had already fallen fast asleep on the back seat, his head resting on a small bag. Everything was going smoothly. The road was clear, there was very little traffic, until suddenly the vehicle began to make a strange sound. Papa Chibike felt the steering wheel pull to one side. He frowned, slowed down, and carefully parked the car along the side of the road. "What is it?" Mama Chibike asked, sitting up straight. "I am not sure," Papa Chibike said. "Let me check." He stepped out of the car and walked around it slowly, bending down, checking the tires, looking under the vehicle. There was a small mechanical problem, not too serious, not the kind of thing that would leave them stranded overnight, but it definitely needed to be fixed before they could continue driving safely. "Calm down," he told Mama Chibike. "You and Chibike should stand by the side of the road. Let me fix this quickly so we can move before it gets completely dark." Mama Chibike gently tapped Chibike on the shoulder. The boy grumbled softly, rubbed his eyes, and stumbled out of the car still half asleep. They both stood by the roadside while Papa Chibike opened the bonnet and began to walk. The road around them was quiet. There were a few tall trees and some low bushes on both sides. The air was cool and calm. Somewhere above them, birds were making their last sounds of the evening before settling in for the night. In the distance, you could hear the faint sound of vehicles on a farther road, but here, where they were parked, it was very quiet. Papa Chibike worked steadily. Mama Chibike stood close by, holding Chibike's hand. It was getting darker by the minute. Papa Chibike was still working on the car when suddenly they heard it, a soft cry. Mama Chibike turned her head quickly to the side. "Did you hear that?" she asked quietly. Papa Chibike paused what he was doing and listened carefully. He heard it too. Yes, but it is probably someone nearby. Maybe a family is passing through this road and the baby is just restless. They waited. Chibike, now more awake, looked around with his big, curious eyes. The cry came again, this time a little louder. That sounds like a baby, Mama Chibike said, her voice low and careful. And it does not sound far. It will stop, Papa Chibike said, going back to his work. Maybe the mother is just settling the child somewhere close. But the cry did not stop. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes, 5 full minutes went by. The cry continued, sometimes soft, sometimes louder, but always there. A small, helpless voice calling out into the quiet evening air. It was not the kind of cry that babies make when they want attention. It was not the short, sharp cry of a baby that is quickly comforted. This was a sustained cry, the cry of a baby that had been alone for a long time, a baby that was tired, hungry, and frightened. Mama Chibike could not stand still any longer. There's something about the cry of a baby that goes straight to a mother's heart. It bypasses the brain and goes directly to the chest. She felt it like a hand pulling her. Papa Chibike, she told her husband, using his real name the way she only did when something very important needed to be said. We need to check where that sound is coming from. Papa Chibike wiped his hands on a cloth and looked around nervously. Check where? It is getting dark fast, and this is a lonely road. We don't know who or what is in that bush. The sound is coming from those bushes over there, she said, pointing to the small cluster of low bushes just a few meters away from where they were parked. Something is not right. A baby does not cry like that for nothing. Papa Chibike was deeply uncomfortable. He was a man who had heard many stories that tell about lonely roads at night, strange things, dangerous things. His heart was beating a little more nervous than normal. Everything in him was saying, finish this car and drive away. But his wife had already taken one step toward the bushes, and Chibike, curious as any 12-year-old boy would be, was already right behind her. Wait, Papa Chibike said quickly. He dropped his tools and went after them. If his family was walking into those bushes, he was not going to stand at the car and watch. Together, the three of them walked carefully toward the bushes. Chibike held his mother's hand tightly. The crying was getting clearer and louder with every step. They pushed carefully through some low branches and dry grass, stepping over stones, watching where they placed their feet in the dim evening light. And then they stopped. There, nestled inside a small woven basket, wrapped in a piece of faded worn cloth, was a tiny baby girl. She was very small. She could not have been more than a few days old. Her little face was scrunched up tight, her tiny fists were clenched, and she was crying with every bit of strength her small body had. Mama Chibike's hand flew to her mouth. "My God," she whispered. "A baby? A real baby? Here?" Chibike stared with the widest eyes. "Mommy, who put a baby here?" Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Papa Chibike looked left and right. He looked up the road and down the road. He scanned the area around them carefully. There was no one. No car parked nearby, no footsteps that he could see clearly, no person standing or sitting or hiding, just the empty road, the darkening evening sky, and this tiny abandoned baby girl crying in a basket in the middle of the bush. Papa Chibike took a step back. His face was tight with worry. "We should not touch this baby," he said, shaking his head. "Something is seriously not right here. Who leaves a baby in a bush on a lonely road? This could be something spiritual, something we do not understand. Let us go back to the car, finish fixing it, and leave this place immediately." Mama Chibike looked at her husband. She did not dismiss his fear. She understood it. She had grown up hearing the same stories he had heard. But when she looked back down at that tiny baby girl, so small, so alone, crying in a basket with no one coming for her, something in her heart made a decision that her mouth had not yet spoken. "I am not leaving without this child. Emeka, look at her," she said softly. Really look at her. She's a baby, a small, innocent, helpless baby girl. She has done nothing wrong. She did not choose to be left here. Someone abandoned her in this bush. If we drive away and leave her, what will happen to her? Can you live with that? But what if, Papa Chibike started. What if nothing? Mama Chibike said gently, but with a firmness that her husband recognized. It was the voice she used when she had made up her mind completely. I will carry her. We will take her home. When we get there, we will decide what to do next. We can go to the police. We can find an orphanage home. We can find a solution. But I will not leave a baby to die alone in the dark. God is watching everything we do tonight. Papa Chibike looked at the baby. He looked at his wife. He looked at his son, Chibike, who was still staring at the baby with those wide, innocent eyes. The eyes of a boy who had not yet learned to be as afraid as grown people become. Papa Chibike exhaled slowly. He did not say yes, but he did not say no either. And in marriage, sometimes silence means, I trust you. Do what your heart says. Mama Chibike bent down carefully and lifted the baby out of the basket. She adjusted the worn cloth around her, tucking it snugly. She held the child close to her chest, and almost immediately, the crying began to slow down. The warmth of a human body, the sound of a heartbeat, the gentle rocking of being held, the little girl could feel it. She was safe now. Someone had her. By the time they walked back to the car, the baby had reduced her crying to small hiccups and soft sniffles. Papa Chibike went back to fixing the car without a word. His hands moved, but his mind was a storm of thoughts. What were they doing? What would people say? What were the consequences of bringing an unknown child into his home? But Mama Chibike sat in the front seat, the baby resting quietly against her chest, and she looked completely at peace. Chibike sat in the back, leaning forward every few minutes to peep at the tiny girl. After a while, he whispered, "She's beautiful, Mommy." Mama Chibike smiled. "Yes, my son, she really is." Papa Chibike finished the repair, wiped his hands, and got back into the driver's seat. He started the engine. He looked at the baby one more time, and even though everything he was feeling, the fear, the doubt, the confusion, even he had to admit in the quiet of his own heart, the child was truly beautiful. He drove, and he drove them all home. When they got home, Mama Chibike did not waste 1 minute. She sent Chibike to his room and immediately set about caring for the baby. First, she boiled water and let it cool to just the right temperature. She bathed the little girl carefully, washing her gently, cleaning every fold of her tiny skin, checking her from head to toe. Other than being hungry and frightened, the baby appeared healthy. A strong child, a survivor already. Mama Chibike found an old feeding bottle, washed it thoroughly, and mixed some warm pap, the soft corn porridge that Nigerian mothers often use to feed young babies. She fed the child slowly and patiently, watching the tiny mouth suck and swallow. The baby fed hungrily. She had not eaten in a long time. When she was full, Mama Chibike found a clean, soft wrapper, folded it several times to make a small mattress, and placed the baby gently on it to sleep. She covered her lightly with another cloth. The baby closed her eyes and slept peacefully, deeply, like someone who had finally, after a long and frightening ordeal, found somewhere safe to rest. That night, after Chibike had gone to sleep, Papa Chibike and Mama Chibike sat in their small sitting room and they talked. It was the kind of quiet, serious conversation that married couples have when a big decision is sitting between them on the table and cannot be ignored. Papa Chibike began. "Tomorrow morning, we should take her to the police station. They will handle it properly. Or we find a good orphanage home. Those are the right steps." Mama Chibike nodded slowly. She did not argue with him, not immediately. "We can do that, but first, let me tell you what is in my heart." Her husband looked at her. "You know our story better than anyone," she began. "We got married 18 years ago. 18 years, Papa Chibike. And for many of those years, how many nights did we cry together in this house praying for a child? How many times did I go to the hospital and come back with bad news? How many times did we fast and pray?" Papa Chibike was very quiet. He remembered every single painful year of it. "And after 18 years of waiting," she continued, "God gave us Chibike, our son, our miracle. We did not give up and God answered." She paused for a moment. "But you also know that since Chibike, I have tried to carry another baby.
I have been pregnant 3 times since then. And 3 times I lost the baby before it could be born. 3 times I came home with empty arms. The room was heavy with the memory of that grief. We have been praying for a daughter for years, Mama Chibiks said softly. We have asked God for a little girl to complete this family. You know this. I know this. She looked at her husband steadily. And tonight, on a quiet road, on our journey home, out of nowhere, God placed a baby girl directly in our path. Not just any baby. A girl, in a basket, with nobody coming for her. Tell me, Papa Chibiks, tell me honestly, is that a coincidence? Or is that God answering a prayer in a way that we did not expect? The silence in the room was long. Papa Chibiks sat with everything she had said. He thought about his faith. He thought about the 18 years. He thought about those 3 lost pregnancies and the nights he had held his wife while she cried. He thought about that tiny girl sleeping peacefully in the next room, making soft sounds, her little chest rising and falling. He leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. If we keep her, he said quietly, we do not keep her as a charity case. We do not keep her as someone else's child that we are helping. We keep her as our own daughter, fully, completely. No difference between her and Chibiks. Mama Chibiks reached across the small table and held his hand. That is the only way I know how to love a child, she said. And with those words, the decision was made. They would not take her to the police. They would not take her to an orphanage. They would raise her as their daughter. They named her Chinenye, a beautiful Igbo name meaning God has given me something of value, because that is exactly what they believed with their whole hearts. God had given, and they had received with open hands and open hearts. Chinenye grew up in that home wrapped in love from every direction. From the very beginning, Mama Chibiks treated her no differently from Chibiks. She cooked the same food for both of them. She braided Chinenye's hair every Sunday morning before church, humming softly while she worked. She attended every school prize-giving day, every cultural day, every parent-teacher meeting. She prayed over Chinenye every night before the girl went to sleep, placing her hand gently on the child's head and speaking blessings over her life. Papa Chibiks, the same man who had shaken with fear on that dark road, became one of the most proudly devoted fathers you could ever see. When Chinenye took her first steps, he jumped up from his chair and cheered so loudly that the neighbors came to the window to see what was happening. When she spoke her first full sentence, he laughed until tears streamed down his face, and then immediately went outside to tell the next-door neighbor. As Chinenye grew, her personality became clear and beautiful. She was a gentle child. She was neat and organized. She always knew where her things were, always made her bed without being told, always washed her plate after eating. She was calm and thoughtful, in a way that sometimes made Mama Chibiks stare at her with quiet wonder. Where did this child come from? How could someone abandon such a precious child? But they did not let those questions poison their joy. They simply loved her. Chibiks, her big brother, was protective of her from the start. When she was small, he carried her on his back when she was tired. When she started school, he walked her there every morning. He was the one who taught her to play and how to ride a bicycle. And even when they grew older and argued the way siblings naturally do, over the television, over whose turn it was to do something, over small things that brothers and sisters argue about, the love between them was real and clear for anyone who looked. Chinenye was also a very serious student. She sat at the front of her class, paid attention to her teachers, completed every assignment, and never wasted time during school hours. She was respectful, they said. She asked good questions. She helped other students who were struggling. Year by year she grew, and year by year she became more and more beautiful, not only in her face, which was striking and full of light, but in her spirit and the way she carried herself. There was a grace about Chinenye that people noticed and commented on. She was the kind of young woman that made elders smile when they saw her and say, "That child has been raised well." Life has a way of testing families, and this family's test came just before Chinenye finished her university education. Papa Chibuike lost his job. The company he had worked for many years, a transport and logistics company, suddenly shut down. The owner had financial problems, and just like that, without much warning, the business closed. The workers were sent home. Papa Chibuike, who had been one of the most reliable men in that company, found himself sitting at home with no income and a family to feed. He tried very hard. He knocked on doors, followed up on connections, applied for other driving jobs, tried to set up a small business selling provisions, but the economy was difficult. Things did not fall into place easily. The weeks turned to months, and the money that had been saved slowly began to dry up. Mama Chibuike kept her market stall going, but trade was slow. The market was difficult and competitive. What she made each day was just barely enough to cover the household basics. By this time, Chibuike, their biological son, was a grown man with his own life. He had moved out, had his own apartment, was working in a company in another part of the state. He was not a bad son, but he was not a present one. When Papa Chibuike called him for help, Chibuike's response was almost always the same thing. "Daddy, I don't have right now. My own situation is tight. I will see what I can do." Sometimes he sent a small amount, just enough to show he had tried. Sometimes nothing came at all. Papa and Mama Chibuike never cursed their son or spoke badly of him. They understood that life could be hard for young people too. But the weight of their situation was heavy, and there were evenings when they sat together and did not speak because there was nothing light to say. It was during this difficult period that Chinenye graduated from university. She had worked for her degree with patience and focus. She did not waste her time at school. She studied, she networked, she was serious. And within a few months of finishing her studies, she found a good job at a reputable company. It was not a glamorous position. It was not a flashy, high-paying executive role. But it was honest, steady work with a real salary. And from the very first month that salary hit her account, before she bought herself new clothes, before she thought about moving to a better apartment, before anything else, Chinenye thought of her parents.
The first time it happened, Mama Chibuike opened the front door and found Chinenye standing there on a Saturday morning with 2 large bags in her hands and a big smile on her face. "Chinenye, you did not tell me you were coming today," Mama Chibuike said, surprised. "I wanted to surprise you, Mommy," Chinenye said, stepping inside and placing the bags on the floor. Mama Chibuike looked into the bags. Rice, beans, garri, palm oil, ground crayfish, tomatoes, pepper, Maggi seasoning, washing soap, spaghetti, sugar, tea, enough to fill a store. Mama Chibuike looked up at her daughter. Her mouth opened and then closed again. She could not find the words immediately. "Chinenye, what is all this?" Chinenye laughed softly and picked up one of the bags to carry it to the kitchen. "Mommy, a daughter cannot visit her mother empty-handed. This is not allowed. Come and help me with this other bag." That was Chinenye. Every single month, without fail, without being reminded, without waiting to be asked, Chinenye sent foodstuff to the house. Always a generous load. And with the food, she always sent money. Sometimes a large amount when she could manage it, sometimes a more moderate amount when her own expenses were high. But it was always something, always consistent. You could set a calendar by Chinenye. If Mama Chibuike mentioned that her knee was paining her and she needed to see a doctor, Chinenye sent the consultation fee and the money for medicine before her mother had even made the appointment. If Papa Chibuike needed transport money to attend an important event or follow up on a job opportunity, he only needed to mention it once to Chinenye and the money would arrive. But it was never just the money and the things. What moved Papa and Mama Chibike most deeply was the way Chinenye did everything. She never sighed with impatience when they called her. She never made them feel like they were a burden. She never answered the phone with a voice that said, "What do you want now?" Instead, she called them first before they even thought to call her. She visited as often as her work schedule allowed. When she came, she sat with them for hours. She listened to her father's stories. She helped her mother in the kitchen. She laughed at the old jokes. She treated their home like a place she was genuinely happy to be. One evening, Papa Chibike was sitting in his favorite chair in the sitting room. The house was quiet. Mama Chibike was in the kitchen preparing the evening meal with the provisions Chinenye had sent that week. Papa Chibike sat very still, and there were tears on his face, not tears of sadness, but the slow, quiet tears that come when a person is so grateful they cannot hold it inside anymore. When Mama Chibike came out and saw him, she sat down beside him without saying anything immediately. After a while, he spoke. "Mama Chibike, do you remember that road, that evening in Imo, when the car broke down?" She looked at him gently. "How can I forget?" "I was afraid," he said. "I did not want to go near that bush. I said, let us leave. Let us fix the car and go. Let us not touch what we do not understand." He shook his head slowly. "If you had listened to me that night, Mama Chibike." Mama Chibike smiled, the warm, steady smile of a woman who had known for a long time that she had made the right choice. She reached out and patted his hand. "But I did not listen to you," she said simply. They looked at each other, and then they both laughed, the deep, full laughter of two people who have walked a long road together and can now look back at every twist and turn with understanding and joy. "God knew what he was doing," Papa Chibike said, wiping his eyes. "He always, always knows." There came a day. Chinenye was in her mid-20s by then, settled in her job, doing well, when Mama Chibike sat her down and told her everything. The journey, the car breaking down, the evening road, the cry in the bush, the basket, Papa Chibike's fear, the decision they made that night. Chinenye listened quietly. She did not interrupt. She did not cry at first. She just listened, her eyes steady and her hands folded in her lap. When Mama Chibike finished, there was a long silence. Then Chinenye said, "So you chose me?" "Yes," Mama Chibike said, "we chose you." Quietly, gently, the way deep feeling comes out when they are no more big enough to hold it. Chinenye reached across and held her mother's hand. "Then I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret that choice," she said. And she meant it, and she kept that promise. Chinenye never forgot where she came from, not the basket in the bush, and not the home where she was loved. She never forgot the parent who stopped on a dark road when they could have kept driving. She never forgot that she was chosen, and because she was chosen, she chose them back, every day, in every way she could. Papa and Mama Chibike were not special people in the eyes of the world. They were ordinary, a transporter and a market trader, driving home on an ordinary evening from an ordinary family visit. But when the moment came, they made an extraordinary choice. They stopped. They listened to the cry. They chose love over fear, compassion over comfort, faith over doubt. And that one choice on one quiet evening road changed 4 lives completely. Life does not always send its blessings in the packages we are expecting. Moral lesson. This story teaches us that God has his way of blessing each and every one in this life. Love is a choice, not just a feeling. Obedience and gratitude open doors that money cannot. Fear can miss your greatest blessing. God answers prayers in unexpected ways. How you treat people determines how life treats you. Do good when you have the chance. You never know who God has placed in your path or why. No one should have believed that Chinenye, the adopted child, would be the one taking care of Papa and Mama Chibike more than their biological child. The end.